I'm Melanie Naranjo, VP of People here at Athena, and I'm going to be reacting to some HR Reddit threads. Never done this before, kind of nervous, but pretty excited to get this done. So let's get into it.
What happens if CEO won't complete harassment training? I'm the HR manager at my job. I report directly to the CEO. The CEO has not done harassment training since 2019.
Oh,
Mind you, this was posted 2 months ago in 2024. Mandatory every 2 years in California. The last 2 months, I've been having his executive assistant assign him time to do the trainings. I've explained to him multiple times how important it is to stay compliant with this. If we get sued, we basically have no defense if training is not done, and he just won't do it. Always say, yeah, I'll get to that. Plus, I'll add that he is the literal worst and treats people like crap, says inappropriate things, etc. High risk of lawsuit. My question is, what happens if he doesn't do it? Nothing unless we get sued? Question mark.
oh boy. Okay. So first of all, I just want to say, like, ooh, this sucks. I'm sure that you are feeling very stressed right now. And also this is so common. It happens all the time, more often than you would think. CEOs and leadership teams, unfortunately, they just feel like they're too busy for it, or they're too important for it, or I've already done this before, I don't need to. And on the HR side of things, your heart is dying on the inside because you know this is both such a big legal risk and also just bad messaging for your employees who may or may not be aware of this. And also probably means that your CEO is never going to get better at some of these things that you're flagging that they're not doing too great at. I would say all of that, sort of like acknowledging all of that. The most important thing is to be as strategic as possible here, because the instinct is probably to bang your head on the table and to be really frustrated or get upset about why they don't care. And the reality is, it sounds like you've already tried that and that's not working. And so the best advice I can give here is you probably want to take a step back to think about who are your allies here and how can you create an environment that convinces your CEO to take the training. It sounds like using the legal stuff is not enough of a scary tactic, at least not coming from you. So a couple of things that you could think about are, who are the people that your CEO really trusts and respects on the team that you might be able to get them to get your CEO to take the training. So maybe if it's the head of sales, have your head of sales talk to the CEO and say like, hey, can you get this done? You could have your lawyer, your in-house counsel, reach out to the CEO. I have found, unfortunately, that CEOs just take legal risks more seriously when it's coming from a lawyer than coming from HR. Not fun, but these are the facts. And lastly, you could literally hold their hand through it. So you could do a watch party where you invite the entire leadership team to watch the training live. You could, if it's really that big of a, if it's really that big or continuous of an issue, pay for someone externally to come and do a live training for your leadership team. So your CEO literally just has to show up, just sit in this room and somebody will train you. So you can get really creative in those ways. But it is so important that you do everything in your power to try and get your CEO to take that training, because as you flagged, it's such a legal risk and it's not great for anyone, either them or the employees or you. So, wow, really feel for you. What a tough one. Sending all the good vibes your way.
All right. This one is from our human resources from 24 days ago. And the subject is how to handle employees saying, but that person gets to do it. I am an HR department of one who handles any and all things HR and many things that are not at my company. We are a small but growing organization, adding a significant number of new positions over the next year in line with our personnel planning strategy. I've recently dealt with a number of requests for accommodation and interactive process conversations. So this question is posed in sort of an attempt to prepare for what I feel is inevitable. In smaller workforces, especially ours, even employees who are not friends or particularly close are aware of others' schedules, whereabouts, etc. We all work together frequently and very interconnectedly due to the nature of our work, meaning there is a lot of, oh, where is so-and-so? Are they here today? When going throughout the day to day. Working from home can be a highly applicable, reasonable accommodation for employees for a number of disclosed conditions. So I anticipate that at some point, some employees will work a hybrid or fully remote schedule and have it noticed by our on-site only employees. While we, meaning the CEO and VPs, are moderately flexible when it comes to hybrid work on a one-off basis, it is generally expected that people be on-site. How would you handle an employee complaining about being on site and citing, well, why doesn't X employee with an accommodation to work from home have to come in? That isn't fair. I realize it's acceptable to tell them you can't get into details with them, but to me, that borders on disclosing that another employee has an accommodation and feels unethical to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first off, you are not wrong to be proactively thinking about this. Anybody who's in HR knows that reasonable accommodation requests are in fact on the rise, and many of them are, as you are pointing out, tied into requests to work from home, especially because for so long, post-pandemic or like during the pandemic, people really did get used to working from home, and the return to office has not been super well received by all employees. Totally get it. Um, Here's the thing. Uh, this is not unique to reasonable accommodations. And that's good news because it means we already have language and templates to lean on. The reality is employees are going to talk to each other. They've always talked to each other. And this has happened in other areas, such as if you think about pay transparency, people talking to each other about people's salaries. I'm going to say a potentially controversial thing and say that I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. And as an HR professional, I think it's totally fine to let employees say what they want to say to each other, and you should never try and get in the way of that. In fact, I think that often tends to backfire because the more that you try and stop employees from talking to each other, the more understandably suspicious and skeptical they're going to get, and the more they're going to want to chat. If you are doing things that you stand by, it should be okay for your employees to chat about whatever it is they want to chat. In response to your question, how do I handle this if somebody asks, hey, like, I want to know why this person gets to do that, right? It's very similar to if somebody asks, how come that person got a promotion and I didn't? How come that person got an increase and I didn't? The worst thing you can do as an HR professional is to actually engage in that discussion and try and answer them at face value. And what I mean by that is you should never talk about another employee, whether it's about their pay, their accommodations, their career trajectory. Your response should always be, hey, I can't share that information with you. That's private. That's that person's business. And I'm not here to talk about somebody else's business. You're welcome to go talk to them directly if you have any questions, but that's not something I can share with you in the same way that I wouldn't answer their questions about your pay or your work accommodation. Well, you wouldn't say work accommodation in this situation, but or your work schedule or your career trajectory, right? That's not my place. But I am here to help you. And so, if there's a reason that you want to talk about this because there's something that you're struggling with, or you want to explore a different work schedule, let's talk about it so that I can understand what your needs are and I can support you. The best thing to do is really to pivot and to focus the conversation on that employee, not on the other person's employee. And you want to be clear about the why, because you don't want it to sound like you are doing this to scapegoat sharing or having a tough conversation. You're doing this to protect someone's privacy, which I imagine they would want you to do for them as well. So it's a tough one, but it's also very doable. And if you're using sound logic and thoughtfulness and you're not getting defensive about it, the conversation tends to go over pretty well. And the minute you say like, hey, I'm doing this to maintain their privacy, I imagine you'd want me to maintain your privacy too. People tend to take a step back and say, okay, yeah, you're right. I do want you to maintain my privacy. So best of luck on this one. You're smart to be thinking about it, but I believe in you. You can definitely handle it. We actually did just have a webinar all about reasonable accommodations. Definitely check it out. We also share a template for how to complete the iterative process so that you can determine whether or not this is a reasonable accommodation that you can and should accommodate. And we also share just best practices for how to respond, how to navigate these discussions, and what it means to be a reasonable accommodation and what it means to be an unreasonable request.
This one is from our Reddit thread, Human Resources. It was posted about 2 weeks ago. What's your HR hot take, specifically regarding managers? My hot take, if you hold HR solely responsible for performance reviews An adoption of technology and systems for giving feedback, the initiative will fail. Everyone, including managers, must understand the why are we doing this question and be able to explain it to their reports.
I have such strong feelings about this. HR should never, ever, ever be the enforcer. That's not our job. We are not your manager. We are not the head of your department. We are not the CEO. We are here to advise. We are here to coach. We are here to facilitate, but we are not here to enforce. And the reason why I feel so strongly about this is quite literally in HR, you have zero authority over anyone who's not in your HR team. If I try and tell a manager, please go performance manage that person, there is nothing stopping the manager from saying thanks, but no thanks, right? And so it is not effective for me to keep yelling at somebody to do a thing that I want them to do. What I need to do is be able to have the CEO's buy-in and the head of the department's buy-in to hold that manager accountable. So 100% agree. HR cannot be responsible for performance managing people or for forcing other people to performance manage people. HR is there to guide, to facilitate, to advise. And that's pretty much it. If you were telling your HR person that it's their job to hold managers accountable, I'm gonna be real honest with you, it's never gonna work. It's never gonna work because guess what? Unless you are prepared to fire that manager for refusing to performance manage that person, there's nothing your HR person can do. And so, my opinion, my hot take is here. I completely agree. This has to be the manager's responsibility. The department has responsibility. The CEO's responsibility, not HR's job.
The title is, Does anyone else find working in HR to be soul-sucking? The post says, early 30s, male, senior HR director, make a great living, have moved up in HR quickly, find myself daydreaming often about ditching this whole soulless corporate nightmare and doing anything else. Navigating corporate politics, watching incompetent leaders consistently get promoted, stroking people's egos, being targeted by other HR people, dodging unsolicited feedback. If I hear that word one more time, feedback, oof. I find it all more and more disgusting and pointless every day. Anyone else?
Oh no. Okay, this post makes me so sad, to be honest. Listen, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm gonna level with you. Um, can HR be tough sometimes? Absolutely. We have to deal with some of the most stressful situations in the workplace. We have a lot of responsibility with zero authority. And we have to be present for some of people's worst moments, whether that be someone responding really poorly to being terminated, whether that be running an employee investigation and you're seeing, all different sides to people, whether that be, a manager exploding at you, which they shouldn't be, but it happens. And yeah, HR can take a lot and it can be really, really tough to be in these spaces. And also, I think it's really important if you're in HR to acknowledge that it is literally part of your job to partner with your CEO on creating a better, more effective culture. And so if you are feeling like this is a terrible, toxic culture, that's a sign that you need to take some action. It's very easy to get into the mindset of, wow, this is happening to me and this is horrible. And I want to acknowledge that. Like it's valid. It's really hard. It can be stressful. Maybe you've tried and it hasn't gone anywhere, right? But at the end of the day, it is your job to try and address these exact kinds of issues. You are the advocate for the employee. And so my first thought is, if you're feeling these things, I would highly encourage you to take a step back, go meta for a quick second and think about what power do I have here? What agency do I have here? And how can I be part of the solution? I will also say that maybe you have already tried all those things and you're now at a point where I've tried everything. I talked to the CEO, I tried to get around these politics, so on and so forth. It's not working. Then you may want to decide, is this the right place for you? I know it can feel really tough in the moment, and you might feel like every place must be this terrible. I can assure you that's not true. There are better jobs out there. It may simply be that your values are not aligned with your company's values. If you're at a place where you are, if I'm reading this correctly, no longer feeling receptive to feedback, if you are feeling frustrated when someone gives you unsolicited feedback, it could be that you're in a place where you're too burnt out to hear it, or it could be that you don't value feedback, in which case you should not work at a company that really values feedback because that's not going to be a good place for you. And so I would really take some time to think about, like, yes, acknowledge your feelings, totally get it. HR does have to deal with really tough things. And also ask yourself the question, do I want to solve the problem or do I just want to put up with it? If you want to put up with it, you don't have to do anything. You can keep, venting, and that's okay. Some people just want a space to vent. But if you want to fix the problem, there is agency that you can take here. And I would recommend that you do that because, quite frankly, it's not fun working at a place that you hate. It just isn't. I can tell you from firsthand experience, it gets so much better when you find a place that you love.
29 years old, also moved up the ladder rather quickly myself. We support the people in operations on a daily basis 24/7, but when we, HR, need support, cricket, cricket. We get scrutinized for any decision we make. I feel like I'm under a microscope constantly, always having to be on the defense as I never know when I'll get attacked or quote unquote stabbed in the back. I always ask, HR takes care of everyone, but who takes care of HR? I have my good and bad days, but seems like it's been a lot more bad days lately, so this post hit me extra hard today. Hang in there best you can.
Oh gosh, this is such a hard post to hear because I've heard the sentiment a lot. Before I jump into my, characteristic problem solving mode, I just want to acknowledge, like, that's a real bummer. That really sucks. I'm very sorry if you are not getting support at your company. There are a couple of places my mind goes to here. One is I'd think about who your advocates are, even if your allies and advocates are internal, right? So maybe your head of people is someone that you can lean on. Or, quite frankly, you may want to build your own HR community outside of your job. I think one mistake that people often make is to just sort of silo themselves off in this echo chamber in this one team within this one department and company, as opposed to making HR friends outside of the workplace so that you can have, a more unbiased and broader network and community to lean on. The other thing I would think about is, you know, what change do you think you would need to see in order to get the support that you need? What is the support that you would like to advocate for? If you are going to your CEO and saying, like, I'm not getting enough support, super hear you. And also from that CEO's perspective, they've got 20 other things on their mind. They're not going to drop what they're doing to help you. But if you can come with a solution, if you can come with, hey, I can make this very easy for you. Here's the thing we've been struggling with. Here's a solution that can fix it. I can do it with this budget or I can do it for free. All I need is your okay and I'll make it happen. It's so much easier for your CEO to say yes, right? Maybe what it is that you need to set clearer boundaries. Maybe what it is that you need to get alignment on your performance management philosophies. Maybe what it is that you need to set clear expectations with new hires around how to appropriately interact with HR, right? I would think about what the solution is so that you can bring that to the table and have it be much easier for the person to say yes than to come to the table with a problem that unfortunately most people just aren't going to prioritize, which I know is really hard to hear because you always drop what you're doing to help somebody else and prioritize their problems. But the reality is really important to understand your audience and figure out how you can get the buy-in that you need to achieve the goal. The question that I always remind people is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? If you want to be effective, you got to learn how to work around things and navigate your audience. If you want to be right, okay, you can keep yelling at your audience, but unfortunately, the reality is you're not going to get very far. And so again, really want to acknowledge the stress and the very real pain that is happening. You're not alone. This is a common issue. And also, I would feel so guilty if I just vented with you. I also want to say, like, here's some practical tips to try and get out of that mode because it's not fun to stay in this mode. And I really want to help you get out of there.
We fired our HR manager. What are your thoughts? We had an employee apply for a mortgage last year. Long story short, she fell behind on payments and is getting foreclosed on. The mortgage company starts calling her HR director, asking if she can verify the letter of verification of employment was real and not fraudulent or forged. My director saw the letter was written. My director saw the letter was written stating that the employee was making fucking thousand more dollars than she actually was. 90,000 inflated to 130,000 for a housekeeping manager. This letter was signed by our HR manager. HR director calls the HR manager and asks if she wrote the letter and signed it, or if the employee forged her signature. HR manager admitted to it and didn't really apologize. She more or less said, "Sorry you're dealing with that." Mind you, the mortgage company said they had been calling the HR manager for weeks and emailing, but she was dodging them. She didn't grasp the severity. The mortgage company is now threatening to go after the payments from us and accusing us of being complicit in the lie. Our legal counsel told the HR director to ask both the employee and our HR manager. This way, we can say something like, "Sorry, but those employees are no longer with the company." Today, after a week of quiet discussion, we got all of our ducks in a row and sat down with the HR manager to terminate her. HR manager was absolutely floored and replied, "I wrote, but the employee was the one who sent it. I would never put my career on the line for someone like that." Absolutely no accountability for what she did. She's been in HR for 25 years and at the company for 9. I feel bad, but even with my 5 years of experience and some common sense, I would have seen the writing on the wall. I feel so bad for the HR manager, but I don't know what she was thinking. She was my best friend at work and we had to cut her. The other employee who had the mortgage dropped to her knees and cried for 2 hours begging for her job back. Probably the worst day in HR I've had so far, but like they did it to themselves. If you can't grasp that's a fireable and illegal activity, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't work for the company any I don't work for the mortgage company. I don't know what their process is with the pay stub thing, but it's a good point. They signed the loan over to her, I think because the letter said she was going to make 130,000 in September of last year, and that letter was dated in June of last year. They probably followed up to see if she was making that much after. Again, I don't really work there, so why would I know what they're doing?
Wow. Okay. Wow. 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 I don't even know what to say. Wow. I listen, I totally hear you from the human perspective that like, yeah, sucks that these two people lost their job, especially when someone's dealing with this mortgage crisis. And also, that was a complete abuse of power for this HR person to uh not only put the company at risk, but just straight up lie and give misinformation. That is not our job. Even if where they were coming from is, I want to help this person secure the loan, that is not our place. It is not our place to make those decisions. Our job is to communicate the right information to the right people when we have authorization. It is wild to me that this person doesn't understand what they did wrong and thinks that it was only the employee's fault. And it's wild to me that the employee doesn't get that this was a huge, just again, just a complete mistake. They should not have done this. This was a lie. You literally lied to this mortgage company. I have no words except to say how wild this is, especially for someone with so much experience, both to do this in the first place and then to not get why it was wrong. I hope that this is a warning to everyone listening in. If you are trying to do something out of the quote unquote goodness of your heart, but it is truly just a lie or it is an abuse of your power, don't do it. Don't do it. It is much worse. This person is now lost their job versus they just wouldn't have gotten this mortgage or they just wouldn't have gotten this loan. Now they've lost their job and probably the loan as well. So, wow.
The title is First Week Working in HR, and It's Just Not for Me. I feel incredibly lucky to get into HR with no experience, but at the same time, I cannot be dead weight. I work as a recruiting assistant and I'm too introverted for it. I'm too awkward during interviews, and that's not fair. I already talked to my manager and he was brutally honest with me. Recruiting is really difficult and stressful. Hats off to all recruiters everywhere.
Yeah, it is tough. It's really tough. And it's always fascinating to see somebody from an outside perspective coming in and getting to experience it. Look, if HR is not bringing you joy, I think there's no shame in that. And like, that's fine, right? There are other jobs out there that you can do, especially if, the issue is that you're feeling introverted. And also, I will say, as an introverted person, I wouldn't say that you can't be successful in HR if you are an introvert. I think the question is, how much do you want to pursue this career? If this is something you really care about, you can do it. I promise you, it might be a little harder for you. It might take more work. It might take more time, but you can get there. Now, should you force yourself to do that? Only if you want to, only if you want to. And so I think, listen, if you're reading this thread and you're feeling like, wow, I'm an introvert, so I can't do this too, or like, wow, it's feeling tough in my first few weeks, listen, I'd give it some time. I'd give it a couple of months. If you still hate it in a couple of months, yeah, go find something else. But, it may just be that it's new for you and it's scary. And that's the same with every job. And I say that because, if you think that, oh, it's just that every job should be easy, probably not the case. You're going to run into this issue in other careers as well. And so give it a shot. If you really hate it, move on. No shame in that. But if you really want to make it work, I really believe in you and you can make it work. In fact, reach out to other HR people and ask anyone else who's introverted and ask what tips they leaned on to get past that and still make it work. I'm a big believer in the power of diversity, and so it's good to have introverts and extroverts and ambiverts and all kinds of personality types in the HR space. It helps us better identify with and relate to and understand the wide variety of employees that we serve.
Did we make the right call to terminate? Today, I terminated an employee. I feel bad because we never know others' financial situation, and I have dealt with the aftermath of my partner being laid off from work last year. It's not my first termination, but this time it felt worse than the other times. This employee has had outbursts in the past and was spoken to about his behavior. He gets irritated and starts throwing stuff around his work area, yelling and getting very disruptive. He's very vocal about feeling underpaid and overworked. There was another incident of his outbursts this week. He became very agitated when he was asked to correct a part he assembled. He started yelling, aggressively shoving stuff around his work area, and name-calling another employee. I don't want to write out the slurs here, but he was calling someone with disabilities slur names and being very offensive. He was given multiple opportunities by his manager to calm down, but within an hour, his manager was back talking to him about the same thing. Employee started to continue to vent and repeat offensive words about the employee to others. Manager sent him home for the day. I talked to the manager and witnesses. After discussing the situation with manager and my boss, we agreed on termination. Would you guys have done anything different? We do have disciplinary process, but allowed to skip to termination depending on the offense and severity of the incident.
Wow. You absolutely made the right call to terminate based on the information that I'm hearing. I super hear what you're saying, that this is a person and you feel bad and it's their livelihood and you know what it feels like, because your partner was let go. But here's the thing. You made this decision as a result of this employee's behavior. They were the ones who chose to act in such a way, which I imagine is against your company policies, and is also just illegal. There are literal laws in place that are anti-harassment laws, and to allow this kind of behavior would not be fair for the rest of your employees, both from a human perspective, right? Nobody wants to work in a hostile work environment, but also from a business perspective, right? Your team will not be set up for success if you continue to allow behavior like this from one employee. Your high performers will quit, understandably, because they don't want to be in this situation. And on top of that, depending on what state you live in, you may literally be in violation of, for example, California's violence prevention laws. And so if you're not acting on these things, you could be putting your company in hot water. And for the record, I think this is the thing people don't understand. Violence is not just physical violence. Violence is also verbal violence. Violence is the threat of violence. And so throwing things around absolutely qualifies as a threat of violence. And so failure to take action here would put your company at risk. Super unacceptable that this person was behaving that way. And to be honest, I don't think there was need for a PIP here at all, because this wasn't a one-time situation. First of all, it wasn't a one-time situation. It sounds like there was a pattern of behavior. And second of all, again, agree with you, depending on the severity of behavior, if they, I don't know, if they in one meeting raised their voice once and it was, just their voice raising, but still appropriate language, maybe you give them a warning. But to use slurs, to use To get violent and throw things around, absolutely unacceptable. You don't need to do it more than once to be terminated. Agree. If anything, you probably should have terminated this person sooner. Well, that was both anxiety-inducing and horrifying. Thanks all for tuning in. Let's do more of these.